Youcat, question number 331. Why is there nevertheless injustice among men? All men have the same dignity, but not all of them meet with the same living conditions. In case where injustice is man-made, it contradicts the gospel. In case where men have been endowed by God with different gifts and talents, God is asking us to rely on one another. In charity, one should make up for what the other lacks. There is a kind of inequality among men that does not come from God, but rather originates in societal conditions, especially in the unjust distribution of raw materials, land, and capital worldwide. God expects us to remove from the world everything that is plainly contrary to the gospel and disregards human dignity. Yet, there is another sort of inequality among men that is quite in keeping with God's will. Inequality in talents, initial conditions, and opportunities. These are an indication that being human means being there for others in charity so as to share and promote life. Blessed Teresa of Calcutta would say, "Love the poor and do not turn your back on them. For if you turn your back on the poor, you turn your back on Christ. He made himself hungry, naked, homeless, so that you and I would have an opportunity to love him." Question number 332. How is the solidarity of Christians with other people expressed? Christians are committed to social justice and societal structures. Part of this is universal access to the material, intellectual, and spiritual goods of this world. Christians also make sure that the dignity of human work is respected, which includes a just wage. Handing on the faith is also an act of solidarity with all humankind. Solidarity is the practical hallmark of a Christian. Practicing solidarity is not just a command of reason. Jesus Christ our Lord identified completely with the poor and the lowly. We see that in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 25 verse 40. To refuse solidarity with them would be to reject Christ. Pope John Paul II would say, principle of solidarity is a principle of Catholic social teaching that aims at strengthening community and promoting a civilization of love. Question number 333. Is there a natural law that everyone can know? If people are to do good and avoid evil, certainly about what is good or evil must be inscribed within them. In fact, there is such a moral law that is, so to speak, natural to men and women and can be known in principle by every person by reason. The natural moral law is valid for everyone. It tells men and women what fundamental rights and duties they have and thus forms the real foundation for life together in the family, in society, and in the state. Because our natural knowledge is often troubled by sin and human weakness, a person needs God's help and his revelation in order to stay on the right path. Pope Benedict XVI would say, the Creator has inscribed on our being the natural law, which is the reflection in our hearts of his plan for creation as the guide and inner standard for our life. And he continues to say, in all cultures there are examples of ethical convergence, some isolated, some interrelated, as an expression of the one human nature, willed by the Creator. The tradition of ethical wisdom knows this as the natural law. Question number 334. What connection is between the natural moral law and the law of the Old Covenant? The law of the Old Covenant expresses truths that by nature are evident to human reason, yet are now proclaimed and authenticated as God's law. St. Augustine would say, God wrote on the tables of the law what men did not read in their hearts. Question number 335. What significance does the law of the Old Covenant have? The law, the Torah, and its centerpiece, the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue, the will of God is manifested to the people of Israel. Following the Torah is for Israel the central way to salvation. Christians know that we can tell by the law what ought to be done. They also know, however, that it is not the law that saves us. Every man has the experience of finding that something good is, so to speak, prescribed. But one does not have the strength to accomplish it. It is too difficult. One feels helpless. Sometimes we see that in the in the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 3, and Romans chapter 7, verses 14 to 25. One sees the law and feels that one has been handed over to sin. And so precisely through the law, it becomes clear how urgently we rely on inner strength in order to fulfill the law. That is why the law, as good and important as it is, only prepares the way for faith in the saving God. Saint Irenaeus of Lyons would say, the law is a pedagogy and a prophecy of things to come. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 19 would say, whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. God bless you all.